She returned home that morning, expecting the familiar warmth and comfort of her house. Instead, she found the locks had been changed without any warning. A sense of alienation washed over her as she realized that her presence was no longer welcome. Legally, the house was still hers, but spiritually, it no longer felt like her own. She ran her hand along the doorframe, remembering how she had once laughed and cried within these walls. The cold metal of the new lock was a stark reminder of how things had shifted. Seeking refuge, she decided to spend the weekend at her friend Clara's house. She packed a small bag, leaving a note asking Clara to hold the house until Sunday. Driving away, she hoped that distance would provide clarity and a temporary escape from the tension at home. Every mile she put between herself and her house felt like shedding a layer of worry. Still, in the back of her mind, a nagging feeling told her this peace would be short-lived. When she returned, she immediately noticed a white sticker near the door handle, signaling the lock had been changed. Her heart sank as she realized the sign was intentional, not accidental. She tried calling her son, Alex, but he did not answer. Parked in the driveway were his car and his wife Celeste's, confirming her fears. Her pulse quickened as she approached the door, hoping for an explanation that would never come. She understood in that moment that the lock change was deliberate. The realization stung, but she refused to cry. The sense of betrayal cut deep, yet a part of her remained composed. She looked around at the familiar garden, now feeling like a stranger in her own sanctuary. Memories of shared family moments flickered across her mind, intensifying the pain of exclusion. That night, she ended up sleeping in her car, trying to find rest in the driver's seat. Morning light revealed Celeste standing on the porch, holding a cup of coffee as if she owned the place. Seeing her there was confirmation. This invasion was intentional and personal. The house, once a symbol of her life's work, had been overtaken. She felt a mix of sorrow and determination swelling inside her. Memories of the house flooded back, reminding her of the day she and her late husband, Jack, bought it in 1974. Jack had passed away on the very porch she now feared to cross. She had been alone ever since, navigating grief while trying to maintain the warmth of their shared home. Every room carried echoes of laughter, love, and life that Celeste could never understand. This history made the betrayal even sharper. After Jack's death, Alex had started visiting less frequently. When he married Celeste, their visits became tied to her preferences rather than family tradition. Celeste disliked the old charm of the house and tried to impose her modern tastes. When Alex's company downsized, they moved in, gradually eroding her sense of belonging. The once welcoming rooms now felt like a stage for their assertions. During the move, Celeste barely spoke to her. Instead, she directed Alex on how to arrange the furniture and renovate the spaces. Personal belongings were shifted or discarded without consultation. Alex excused the behavior, claiming Celeste only wanted a more contemporary home. She watched helplessly as her house changed before her eyes. The living room remodeled, a new coffee machine replacing hers, even the milk removed from the fridge. She tried to adapt, hoping to remain a gracious guest in her own home. Celeste insisted on calling her Nancy instead of Mom or Mrs. Tanner. It was a subtle reminder of her diminished status. She overheard conversations about her clutter and negative energy, reinforcing the sense of being unwelcome. Every attempt to fit in felt like walking on thin ice. She hoped the arrangement would be temporary, but days stretched into weeks without change. A call from Clara reminded her that she deserved rest, prompting another short getaway. Upon returning, she faced the harsh truth. The locks had been changed, sealing her out. The house that had nurtured generations now stood as a fortress against her. Family dinners became tense affairs. Celeste remained indifferent to traditions and conversations, while Alex admired her wife openly. She felt invisible, reduced to a spectator in her own life. Requests for minor assistance were met with casual dismissal. The home that once radiated love now vibrated with quiet tension. Financial demands from Alex added to her frustration. Promises to repay borrowed money were rarely kept. Her generosity, once a source of pride, now seemed exploited. Visits became shorter, conversations curt. Her role had shifted from caretaker to reluctant banker and guest. Celeste voiced her discomfort about living in the house. Nancy stayed silent, not wanting to create friction for Alex. Celeste's sense of being trapped heightened the tension. Boundaries blurred as her private spaces were encroached upon. The guest had become the invader. Celeste even requested to use the master bedroom, forcing Nancy to move her belongings. Her personal space eroded with each passing day. In the living room, Celeste meditated without permission, asserting control. Nancy felt more like an observer than the owner. Her slippers, neatly arranged at the door, were a silent testament to her claim. Morning routines became awkward. Nancy prepared oatmeal quietly, apologizing for the slightest noise. Celeste demanded silence, treating the space as her own. The house no longer felt like a home, but a carefully staged exhibit. Every step she took reminded her of her outsider status. The tipping point came when Celeste started opening her mail. A bank statement left visible. Celeste shrugged in response to Nancy's question. She felt dehumanized, treated like property instead of a person. Efforts to discuss matters with Alex were ignored, leaving her powerless. Attempts to regain control over minor aspects of her life failed. Her familiar armchair disappeared from the living room. Old rugs replaced without consideration, for her tastes made her feel discarded, like outdated furniture. Every change reinforced the feeling of invisibility. She overheard Celeste discussing the plan to change the locks, realizing that confrontation was inevitable. To avoid immediate conflict, she decided to leave for Clara's house. Distance gave her clarity, and she resolved to take back control. Returning home, she saw a notice about a security system installation. The new locks were in place, a concrete barrier to her presence. Betrayal and exhaustion mingled in her chest. The house that had cradled her life was now inaccessible. She stood on the porch, feeling the weight of exclusion, but also a spark of resolve. The house was eerily quiet as she listened for any movement inside. Memories of Jack and the early days of the house contrasted sharply with the cold silence. Steps echoed in her mind as she realized she had been locked out, yet she refused to surrender. The space remembered her, even if the current inhabitants did not. She parked 2 blocks away, wrapping herself in a travel blanket and holding a bottle of whiskey for comfort. Morning brought a glimpse of Celeste, holding a cup that Nancy herself had gifted. The sight ignited a determination to reclaim what was hers. She would not be a passive victim. Nancy decided it was time to fix what Celeste had broken, on her own terms. She remembered Ernie, the locksmith who had once helped them with the doors. She called him without giving explanations, insisting it had to be done that very day. Ernie agreed, trusting her tone and urgency. Nancy felt a surge of empowerment. Finally, a small victory in her favor. Ernie arrived promptly and replaced the modern hardware with the old brass deadbolt she preferred. He handed her 2 new keys, a tangible sign of reclaimed authority. The act itself was simple, but its symbolism was immense. She held the keys tightly, imagining the door swinging open to welcome her on her own terms. Nothing would stop her from restoring her home now. Entering the house, she noticed subtle changes Celeste had made. the lavender scent in the air, the absence of family photographs. Nancy carefully returned her belongings to their rightful places. She turned off the fog diffuser and rearranged items exactly as she wanted. Every adjustment reaffirmed her control. The house started feeling like her sanctuary again. Moments later, Celeste and Alex arrived, surprised to find Nancy's belongings on the lawn. She calmly explained that they were hers and insisted they remove their items. The confrontation was tense, yet Nancy maintained her composure. She gave them 15 minutes to gather their things, refusing to escalate the situation. This was her home, and she would not be intimidated. Alex attempted to justify their actions, but Nancy remained firm. She reminded him that she had been evicted without warning, and no explanation or plea could excuse it. Celeste avoided eye contact, gathering her belongings silently. Nancy's quiet strength forced them to comply. The balance of power had shifted. As they left, she closed the door gently, not slamming it in anger. Peace filled the rooms she had reclaimed. The house, now quiet, seemed to breathe with her relief. She walked from room to room, savoring the calm. It was a moment of quiet triumph and clarity. She reflected on the memories the house held and her connection to them. Every corner contained pieces of her life: love, grief, laughter, and resilience. She understood that the house remembered her just as she remembered it. Returning with dignity was enough to restore her bond. Home was not about possession alone, but about presence and respect. Nancy restored order to the kitchen, placing items exactly where they belonged. She lit a cinnamon-scented candle, filling the air with warmth. Important documents confirming her ownership surfaced among her things, a reassurance of legal authority. Each task she completed reinforced her right to the space. She felt both secure and empowered. She met with her lawyer, Howard Leonard, to discuss the need for protection and updated documentation. Howard agreed to assist, suggesting a revision of the will and a power of attorney for banking matters. Nancy felt relief at having a professional safeguard her rights. She knew that clarity and preparation would prevent future intrusions. Returning to normal life, Nancy shopped for groceries and fresh flowers. She dined in the quiet, enjoying her own company. Evenings were peaceful, the home echoing with calm rather than tension. She opened the windows to listen to the wind, savoring solitude and serenity. Life began to feel gentle again. Sharing her experiences with Clara brought comfort. Clara listened with disbelief and concern, but understood Nancy's plight. The conversation offered clarity and support, yet Nancy emphasized her need for personal space. She realized rebuilding her life meant regaining autonomy, free from interference. Nancy began sorting through items that needed repair or disposal. She found her wedding album hidden under cushions, a portal to cherished memories. Reflecting on photographs of Jack and Alex, she considered the distance that had grown between them. This act of organizing became a ritual of reclaiming her past. Alex eventually visited with lemon bars, attempting to mend their relationship. Nancy declined his offer, asserting her position firmly. Though Alex acknowledged his mistakes, Nancy remained resolute, unwilling to compromise her dignity. She had learned that reconciliation required boundaries and respect. The next morning brought serenity. Nancy found an old notebook with a note from Jack, a reminder of his enduring presence. The house began to feel like a home once more, infused with history, love, and regained authority. Each room reflected her choices and values. She felt connected to the space in a profound, personal way. Celeste sent a package from Chicago containing a dress and a photograph with Alex. Nancy recognized the gesture but did not forgive. Acknowledgement did not equal reconciliation. She began revising her will to secure her property against future disputes. Protection and independence were now intertwined with her sense of peace. Legal changes ensured the house remained hers, but the terms of inheritance were adjusted. Howard supported her decisions, emphasizing the importance of clarity in future dealings. Nancy felt free, unburdened by uncertainty, and ready to live life on her own terms. She noticed Alex's car nearby, but he did not stop. Days passed with no contact, leaving Nancy in reflection and calm. Memories of her key and the door reminded her of the past, but did not dictate her present. Her autonomy had been restored, and she felt secure. Final documents from Howard confirmed her legal authority over the house. Signing them provided a sense of closure and empowerment. Later, Alex called requesting a meeting, which she scheduled deliberately, taking control of the timing. The past intrusions no longer dictated her actions. On Sunday, she baked cornbread while Alex arrived, visibly uncertain. She noticed his fatigue and caution, a reflection of his recognition of her strength. They sat together, a tentative bridge forming between mother and son. The atmosphere was cautious, but civil. Nancy admitted her own shortcomings, acknowledging she had allowed others to influence her life. She observed Alex not just as her son, but as a person navigating his own flaws. He confessed he had not intended to use the house against her, a quiet moment of honesty. The first seeds of understanding were planted. She revealed the revised will, tying inheritance to respect and the quality of their relationship. Boundaries were set, and she made clear she would no longer allow outside influence to dictate her life. Alex accepted without argument, though the weight of accountability showed on his face. A new chapter was beginning, defined by clarity and mutual understanding. Nancy insisted on truth and boundaries if Alex wanted to remain in her life. He hesitated, uncertain of his own dignity, but she held firm. Before leaving, he promised to call, but she did not rush him. Weeks passed with no calls, yet Nancy continued living fully, tending her home, enjoying nature, and reading. Life became more honest and authentic, guided by her own choices. On the third week, a handwritten letter arrived from Alex, acknowledging his mistakes and expressing how much he missed her. The handwriting was unmistakable, though no return address was included. Nancy left the letter unanswered, allowing it to sink into the walls, letting time carry its weight. She felt neither resentment nor urgency, simply the quiet strength of patience. Nancy visited the bank to finalize her list of beneficiaries, ensuring her property was protected from disputes. The banking manager assisted in completing the paperwork. She explained that the effort was not born from conflict, but from exhaustion at always being the only adult in the room. The sense of control and security gave her renewed peace. She wrote a note asserting that the house was not a prize or a transaction, but her life and memories. Every line emphasized that the home was more than bricks and wires. It held love, history, and endurance. The note remained with her documents, a symbol of clarity and unwavering resolve. Thanksgiving arrived quietly, with just Nancy and her memories of shared meals. She prepared warm squash stew and apple pie, honoring herself and her years. Pouring tea to Jack, she offered a silent toast to peace, remembering the past while embracing her present. The house radiated warmth despite its emptiness, filled with respect for her own journey. The next morning, a package from Chicago arrived without a return address. Inside was a locket with a photograph of Nancy and Alex. No note accompanied it. The image alone carried meaning. She held it thoughtfully, neither forgiving nor fully reconciling, simply acknowledging the gesture. Nancy took a walk to the lake, braving the wind and chill. She reflected on Alex's childhood and what it truly meant to be a mother. The solitude allowed her to process her emotions without judgment. Each step felt like reclaiming both herself and her role in the story of her family. Returning home, Nancy found the house intact, untouched by chaos. Clara called, discussing new boundaries her own daughter had established. They spoke about films, neighbours, and future plans, enjoying normal conversation free from tension. Nancy felt a sense of normalcy return to her life. She placed Alex's photo into the locket. It was not forgiveness, but a small step toward understanding and measured reconciliation. Memories of shared time and love were honored without granting unrestricted access. The gesture symbolized a bridge, cautiously built. The following morning, Nancy noticed footprints on the porch leading to her house. Whoever had been there did not knock or announce themselves. It stirred curiosity, but no fear. Her home remained under her control. She trusted the space to hold her boundaries firmly. In the library, she received a book with Alex's notes. One essay was circled twice, revealing his attention to detail and thoughtfulness. Nancy appreciated the insight into his mind, a glimpse into the man beyond her son. The gesture felt personal, a quiet form of connection without intrusion. Clara suggested a trip next spring, offering a chance to escape and reflect. Nancy agreed to consider it, valuing the possibility of renewal and adventure. Plans became a tool for healing, allowing her to look forward rather than dwell on past betrayals. Nancy reminded herself that she owed no one her data, her emotions, or her energy. She did not need to scream or retaliate. Lighting a candle symbolized peace and clarity. The simple act reinforced her control and inner calm. The house had become a mirror of her resolve. Each room reflected her choices and priorities. It was a sanctuary, imbued with memories, yet governed by her rules. She felt the weight of the past transform into strength for the future. Nancy reflected on the holidays, embracing quiet celebrations that honored her life and legacy. She took joy in cooking, organizing, and maintaining her space with intention. Every meal, every cleaned surface, every photograph replaced with care reinforced her presence and ownership. She embraced letters, packages, and memories as tokens to appreciate, not sources of conflict. Each item, carefully handled, reminded her that control and peace were intertwined. She was no longer subject to the whims of others in her own home. Nancy sat by the window, watching the trees sway in the wind. Solitude had become a companion, not a punishment. She realized that life without expectation from others offered clarity and fulfillment. Weeks passed as she tended her home and garden, building routines that honored her needs. The sense of autonomy brought both peace and pride. Each day reaffirmed her ability to live fully, on her terms. The final documents from Howard ensured her home was protected by law. Signing them brought a sense of closure and empowerment. Every decision, from locks to wills, reflected her right to protect herself and her memories. Alex eventually called to schedule a meeting, which she controlled with calm precision. Sundays became a space for measured interaction, guided by her rules. Each encounter balanced reflection with healthy boundaries. Nancy acknowledged her part in the past, seeing the influence of others on her decisions. She observed Alex's humanity, not just his role as her son or husband to Celeste. Honest dialogue allowed for cautious reconciliation. She set clear conditions for inheritance, tied to respect and behavior, ensuring fairness and accountability. Alex accepted silently, aware of the new balance. The home was hers, legally and emotionally. Finally, Nancy embraced life without waiting, without anticipation, living fully in the present. She tended to her home, her garden, and herself with dignity. The house had survived trials, and so had she. Peace, control, and love coexisted under its roof once more.